The alarm rang before the sun came up. The single father opened his eyes slowly, already tired before the day even began. His small apartment was quiet except for the soft sound of breathing from the next room. He lay still for a moment, staring at the cracked ceiling, letting the weight of another long day settle on his chest. Life had not been easy since he became the only parent in the house. There was no one else to share the load, no one else to worry about the bills or the meals or the endless list of things that needed fixing. Still, every morning, he got up, he moved quietly so he would not wake his child. The floor creaked under his feet, and he paused, listening. Silence. He let out a small breath and went to the kitchen. The fridge was nearly empty, but there was enough for breakfast. He made something simple, packed a small lunch, and checked the clock more times than he wanted to admit. Time always felt like it was running ahead of him. When his child finally woke up, sleepy eyes met his tired smile. They did not talk much. Words were not always needed. He helped get ready, tied shoes, and listened to a short story about school. Those few minutes were the best part of his day. They reminded him why he kept going, even when his body ached and his mind felt heavy. After dropping the child off, he went straight to work. His job was not special. It paid just enough to survive. The hours were long, the work was physical, and the respect was low. But he did not complain. Complaining never paid rent. He kept his head down, did what was asked, and waited for the day to end. By the time evening came, his arms were sore and his back felt stiff. He checked his phone. No missed calls. No emergencies. That was a good sign. He started to walk home as the sky slowly darkened. Streetlights flickered on one by one, and the air grew cooler. He liked this part of the day, even though he was exhausted. It was quiet. The world felt slower. Halfway home, he noticed something unusual. A large black car was stopped on the side of the road. It looked expensive, the kind of car he only saw on television or in business areas. Its hazard lights blinked softly, lighting up the empty street. He slowed his steps without thinking. His first instinct was to keep walking. He had learned the hard way that getting involved often brought trouble. He took a few more steps, then stopped. Something felt off. The car engine was still running. The driver's door was slightly open. No one stood nearby. No phone calls, no shouting, no sign of help on the way. He stood there, caught between caution and concern. He thought about his child waiting at home. He thought about how late it was getting. He told himself it was not his problem, but his feet did not move. He turned back. As he got closer, he saw a man inside the car. The man looked older, dressed neatly, but his face was pale. His head was leaned back, and his eyes were half closed. The single father tapped lightly on the window. No response. His heart began to beat faster. He opened the door carefully and spoke, keeping his voice calm. Still nothing. The man's breathing was shallow, uneven. Panic tried to rise, but he pushed it down. Panic never helped. He reached for his phone and called emergency services. He explained the situation as clearly as he could, giving a location, describing the man's condition. The operator told him help was on the way and asked him to stay with the man. He did exactly that. He loosened the man's tie and made sure he was sitting safely. He spoke to him softly, even though he did not know if the man could hear. He talked about simple things, about staying awake, about help coming soon. He did not know why he chose those words. They just came. Minutes felt like hours. Cars passed by but did not stop. The road was quiet again. The blinking hazard lights kept flashing, steady and calm, like they were counting time. Finally, sirens filled the air. Relief washed over him so strongly that his knees felt weak. An ambulance pulled up, followed by another vehicle. Paramedics moved fast, their voices firm and focused. They asked a few quick questions. He answered what he could. He stepped back, giving them space. As they worked, he watched from a distance. The man was placed on a stretcher, oxygen mask covering his face. His eyes opened briefly. Just for a second, they met the single father's gaze. There was fear there, and confusion, and something else that looked like gratitude. Even before the words could be spoken, the paramedics loaded the man into the ambulance. One of them turned and thanked the single father for stopping. He nodded once, not trusting his voice. People began to gather. A few curious faces. A few phones raised. He felt uncomfortable. He did not like attention. He never had. Before anyone could ask his name, before anyone could say more, he turned and walked away. His heart was still racing as he made his way home. The streets felt different now, heavier somehow. He replayed the scene in his mind, wondering if he had done enough, wondering if the man would be okay. When he reached his apartment, the light in the window was still on. He unlocked the door quietly. Inside, his child was asleep on the couch, blanket half fallen to the floor. He picked the child up gently and carried him to bed. As he sat on the edge of the mattress, the events of the evening finally caught up with him. His hands trembled slightly. He rested them on his knees until they became still again. He did not tell anyone what had happened. Not the next day. Not the day after that. To him, it was not a story to share. It was simply a moment where a choice was made. Outside, the city kept moving. Somewhere across town, doctors worked to save a life. Somewhere inside a hospital room, questions were being asked. But the single father lay down beside his child and closed his eyes, unaware that this ordinary decision, made on an ordinary road, had just quietly changed everything. The ambulance doors closed with a heavy sound that stayed in his mind long after the sirens faded. Inside the moving vehicle, the older man lay still while paramedics worked quickly around him. One checked his pulse again. Another adjusted the oxygen mask. Their faces were serious but calm. They had done this many times before, yet something about this case felt urgent. The man's eyes opened for a short second as the vehicle turned a corner. Bright lights flashed across his vision. His thoughts were scattered. He did not fully understand what had happened. He remembered driving. He remembered a sudden tight feeling in his chest. After that, everything became unclear. He tried to speak, but the oxygen mask made it difficult. A paramedic leaned closer and told him to relax. "You're safe," the paramedic said firmly. "Help is here." Those simple words seemed to steady him. At the hospital, the emergency team was already waiting. The stretcher rolled through bright hallways under white lights. Nurses asked questions quickly. Machines were connected. Monitors began to beep in steady rhythm. The room filled with quiet urgency. While doctors focused on the patient, another group of people began arriving at the hospital entrance. They wore formal clothes and serious expressions. Security staff moved aside quickly when they saw them. It became clear that the man brought in by ambulance was not an ordinary patient. Within minutes, phone calls were being made. Assistants were speaking in low voices. Someone informed the hospital director personally. The atmosphere shifted. What had started as a simple roadside emergency was now something much bigger. The older man was well known in business circles. He owned companies that employed thousands of people. His name was connected to large buildings, major projects, and news headlines. He was used to being surrounded by drivers, assistants, and security. But tonight, he had chosen to drive alone. Back in the emergency room, doctor confirmed that he had suffered a serious medical episode. If help had not come quickly, the outcome could have been very different. Timing had saved him. When he was finally moved into a private hospital room, machines still monitored his heart. The room was quiet now, except for the soft sound of equipment working steadily. Outside the door, security guards stood watch. Late that night, he fully regained consciousness. His mind was clearer. A doctor explained what had happened. The doctor spoke honestly but gently. "You were very lucky," he said. "Someone found you in time and called for help." The older man listened carefully. "Who?" he asked. The doctor shook his head slightly. "We don't know yet. The paramedic said a man was with you when they arrived. He gave basic information and left before anyone could ask more questions." The older man frowned slightly. That surprised him. Most people, if they recognized him, would have stayed. They would have asked for something. A photo, a connection, a reward. But this stranger had simply walked away. He closed his eyes and tried to remember. Through the blur of confusion earlier, he recalled a face leaning toward him, a steady voice telling him to stay awake. There was no fear in that voice, no excitement, just concern. The next morning, news of his hospitalization began spreading quietly among his close circle. Senior staff arrived to check on him. They looked relieved to see him awake. Conversations filled the room, but his mind kept returning to one question. Who was the man who stopped? He asked his head of security to review traffic cameras near the location where he had been found. He wanted to identify the person who had helped him, not for publicity, not for headlines. He wanted to thank him properly. Security teams began their work immediately. They contacted local authorities. They reviewed camera footage from nearby buildings and traffic lights. It took time, but slowly, pieces of the moment came together. They saw the car parked on the side of the road. They saw one figure walking past at first, then stopping. The figure hesitated for a moment, then turned back. The footage showed him approaching the car carefully. A few minutes later, emergency vehicles arrived. Then they saw something that surprised everyone watching. As the ambulance doors closed, the man did not wait. He did not look around for attention. He simply walked away down the road, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly tired, like someone finishing a normal day. The security team zoomed in as much as possible, but the camera angle did not capture a clear face. It showed simple clothes. Nothing fancy. No sign that the man even knew who he had just saved. When the older man watched the footage from his hospital bed, he stayed silent for a long time. The room felt different now. All his wealth, all his power, all the people around him, none of that had mattered in that moment on the road. What had mattered was that one stranger decided to stop. Later that afternoon, he asked a simple question. Did he ask for anything? His assistant shook her head. No, he left before anyone could even get his name. That answer stayed with him. Meanwhile, across town, the single father was at work again. His muscles were still sore from the day before. He had woken up early as usual. He had made breakfast. He had walked his child to school. Nothing about his routine had changed. At work, someone mentioned hearing sirens in the area the night before. He listened quietly but said nothing. He did not see any reason to share what had happened. In his mind, he had only done what any decent person should do. During his lunch break, he checked his phone briefly. No messages, no calls from unknown numbers. He felt a strange sense of relief. He did not want complications. His life was already full enough. That evening, when he returned home, his child asked why he looked tired. He smiled and said it had been a long day. They ate dinner together and talked about school. The moment on the road felt distant now, like something from another world. Back at the hospital, however, plans were quietly forming. The older man insisted that the search continue. He wanted to meet the person who had made a simple but powerful choice. His staff suggested offering a public reward. He immediately refused. If he wanted attention, he would have stayed, he said calmly. Instead, he ordered a quiet search. No press, no announcements, just facts. Over the next few days, security teams followed small leads. They tracked the direction the man had walked after leaving the scene. They checked nearby stores and bus stops for additional footage. Slowly, a pattern began to appear. The man seemed to live in a modest neighborhood not far from the road. When the older man heard this, he leaned back in his chair and looked out the hospital window. The city stretched wide in front of him. Tall buildings stood beside older apartment blocks. Busy streets crossed quiet neighborhoods. He had spent most of his life in boardrooms and private offices. Yet the most important moment of his life had happened on a simple roadside, because someone from that quieter part of the city cared enough to stop. He made one more quiet decision that night. He would not just thank the man. He would understand him first. And far away, unaware of the growing search, the single father tucked his child into bed once again. He turned off the light and sat in the dark for a few minutes, listening to the steady breathing in the room. Outside, traffic moved in the distance. The world continued as usual. He had no idea that somewhere in a private hospital room, a powerful man was thinking about him. He had no idea that cameras had captured his quiet act. He had no idea that the simple choice to turn back that night had set something much larger in motion. To him, it was just another day. But for someone else, it was the day everything changed. Days passed, but the older man could not forget the face he barely remembered. He had returned home from a hospital under strict medical advice to rest. His house was large, quiet, and carefully designed. Staff members moved gently through the halls, speaking in low voices. Fresh flowers were placed in every room. Healthy meals were prepared on time. Everything was controlled, organized, predictable. Yet his thoughts kept returning to that uncontrolled moment on the side of the road. He stood by the wide window in his living room one morning, looking out over the city skyline. From up there, everything looked small and manageable. Cars moved like tiny dots. People were invisible from that height. It was strange to think that one invisible person had made the biggest difference in his life. His head of security entered quietly and informed him that the team had narrowed down the search area. They had followed camera footage from the street where the car had stopped. The man who helped him walk several blocks before turning into a neighborhood filled with old apartment buildings. The cameras were not perfect, but the direction was clear. "Do not approach him yet," the older man said calmly. "I want to know more first." It was not suspicion. It was respect. He did not want to disturb the life of someone who clearly valued privacy. Meanwhile, in that modest neighborhood, life was moving at its usual pace. The single father woke up before sunrise again. The routine had not changed. Alarm, quiet steps, simple breakfast, school drop-off, work. But lately, he felt something he could not explain. It was not fear. It was not excitement. It was more like a quiet question sitting at the back of his mind. Sometimes, during short breaks at work, he wondered what had happened to the older man. Was he recovering? Did he have family? Did anyone care enough to sit beside him in the hospital? He shook the thoughts away each time. It was not his place to wonder. He had done what he could. Life required him to focus forward, not backward. At home, his child had been more talkative lately. School projects, small victories, little worries. He listened carefully, even when he was tired. He knew that one day these small talks would become rare. So he paid attention now. One evening, while washing dishes, he noticed how worn out his hands looked. The skin was rough from years of physical work. He smiled slightly. Those hands had lifted heavy boxes, fixed broken furniture, held a small child during storms, and just days ago, steadied a stranger fighting to stay conscious. He did not see himself as special. He saw himself as responsible. Across the city, the older man asked for more detailed information. His team discovered that the apartment building where the single father lived had several security cameras near the entrance. With legal permission arranged quietly, they reviewed additional footage. There he was, the same man from the roadside. He walked into the building carrying a simple bag, shoulders slightly bent from exhaustion. No sign of excitement. No sign of someone who had just saved a life that newspapers would call important. The older man watched the footage twice. "Does he know who I am?" he asked. "There is no indication that he does," his assistant replied. That answer meant more than anything else. The older man made another decision. He asked his team to look into the single father's life, but carefully. No pressure, no disturbance, only public records and surface details. They found employment records showing long work hours at a warehouse. They saw school enrollment information for a child living at the same address. They saw unpaid medical bills from years ago. Nothing dramatic, nothing criminal, just a quiet story of someone surviving day by day. When the older man read the summary, he sat back in silence. He had spent decades building companies, negotiating contracts, managing risks. He understood numbers better than emotions. But this situation was different. This was not about business. He asked one more question. Does he have support? Family? The answer came softly. No partner listed. No extended family nearby. That stayed in the air for a moment. The older man thought about the night of the incident again. The steady voice. The calm presence. That strength had come from somewhere. It was not accidental. Meanwhile, the single father faced his own quiet challenges. One afternoon, his supervisor informed him that overtime hours would be reduced for the next month. It was said casually, like normal workplace news. But for him, it meant less income. He nodded and accepted it without argument. Arguing would not change the decision. That night, he sat at the small kitchen table after his child went to sleep. He spread out bills in front of him. Rent, utilities, school expenses. He calculated carefully, adjusting numbers in his head. It would be tight, very tight, but he had handled worse before. He leaned back in his chair and looked around the small apartment. The walls were simple. The furniture was old but clean. It was not much, but it was theirs. He whispered to himself, "We'll manage." He always said that. At the same time, in a large office overlooking the city, the older man was preparing to return to work part-time. His health was improving steadily. Doctors had warned him to reduce stress. He listened, but his mind remained active. He requested a quiet visit to the neighborhood where the single father lived, not to meet him, just to see. Late one afternoon, a simple car drove through the area, without drawing attention. The older man sat in the back seat, looking out the window. He saw children playing near the building entrance. He saw a small grocery store on the corner. He saw worn sidewalks and faded paint on apartment walls. Then he saw him. The single father was walking home, carrying a small bag of groceries in one hand. His child walked beside him, talking about something with great excitement. The father listened carefully, nodding, smiling tiredly but sincerely. There was no audience, no cameras, no performance, just a parent and a child walking home together. The older man felt something shift inside him. For years, people had approached him asking for investments, donations, partnerships. They saw his money first, his humanity second. But this man had seen none of that. He had seen only a human being in trouble. The car continued driving slowly past the building. "That's enough," the older man said quietly. He did not want to feel like he was spying. He only needed confirmation of what he already suspected. That night, he sat alone in his study. Papers and reports lay untouched on his desk. Instead, he thought about fairness. Life had given him wealth, power, and influence. Life had given the single father responsibility, struggle, and quiet strength. Yet on that road, both lives had balanced equally for a brief moment. One had needed help, the other had given it. He decided that gratitude should not come in loud announcements or public rewards. It should come in understanding. Back in the small apartment, the single father helped with homework at the kitchen table. They laughed over a simple mistake in a math problem. Later, he read a short story before bedtime. When the room grew quiet, he turned off the light and stood by the doorway for a few seconds, watching his child sleep. He felt tired but peaceful. He had no idea that someone powerful now knew his address. He had no idea that conversations were happening in offices far above the streets he walked every day. To him, life was still about small wins, paying rent on time, seeing a good grade on a school paper, fixing a leaking faucet without calling a repairman. But somewhere else in the city, plans were slowly forming. Not plans to repay him with cash handed in an envelope. Not plans to bring cameras to his door, but plans that would quietly change the direction of his future. And still, he slept peacefully that night, unaware that the choice he made on a quiet road was about to return to him in a way he never expected. The plan did not begin with a meeting or a phone call. It began quietly, the way real change often does. The older man understood that walking into the single father's life all at once could feel overwhelming. Gratitude, when handled carelessly, could turn into pressure. He did not want that, so he chose patience. The first change came without a clear reason. One morning, the single father arrived at work and noticed a new notice posted near the entrance. The company was updating safety equipment and offering optional training sessions that came with paid hours. It was unusual. Training was rarely paid. He signed up without thinking much about it. The sessions were simple but helpful. He learned small things that made his job easier and safer. At the end of the week, his paycheck was slightly higher than expected. It was not a lot, but it helped. He frowned at the numbers, checked them twice, then shrugged. Sometimes luck showed up quietly. Around the same time, the school sent a message home about a new after-school program. It was affordable, supervised, and focused on learning skills rather than just keeping children busy. The single father hesitated at first. Money was tight, but the cost was lower than expected, and the hours fit his work schedule better. He signed the form. His child came home excited on the first day, talking nonstop about the activities. Seeing that excitement made the decision feel right. He did not know that both opportunities had been gently encouraged by someone with influence. Across the city, the older man reviewed updates from his team. Everything was moving smoothly. No direct contact. No disruption. Just small adjustments that ease pressure without creating questions. Keep it natural, he reminded them. If it feels forced, stop. He knew how it felt to have things handed to you in a way that took away dignity. He would not do that to the man who had saved his life. Meanwhile, the single father noticed other small shifts. The landlord fixed a long-standing plumbing issue without being asked. The grocery store near his apartment began offering discounts on basic items. At work, his supervisor spoke to him with a bit more respect, assigning him steadier shifts. None of it felt impossible. None of it felt unreal. It felt like life was slowly becoming less heavy. One evening, after dinner, he sat at the kitchen table while his child worked on homework. The bills were still there, but the stack felt thinner. The numbers were still tight, but not crushing. He allowed himself a rare moment of relief. He leaned back and closed his eyes for a second. Across town, the older man did something he had not done in years. He visited one of the foundation offices unannounced. The foundation usually handled large projects, public initiatives, and long-term programs. This time, he asked about something smaller. What happens to people who fall just above the line for help? He asked. The staff explained that many working parents earn too much to qualify for aid, but too little to feel secure. They work constantly, yet one emergency could break them. The older man nodded. He knew this story now. He authorized a pilot program focused on quiet support. No press, no branding, just help that blended into daily life. The single father became one of many, but the intention behind it was personal. Weeks passed. The older man's health continued to improve. Doctors allowed him to return to normal activity with caution. Still, his mind remained focused on one thing he had not yet done. He had not said thank you. He knew the moment had to be right. The single father, on the other hand, was focused on immediate concerns. One afternoon, his child came home with a permission slip for a school trip. The cost was small compared to others, but for him, it still required thought. He sat at the table that night, pen in hand, hesitating. He wanted to say yes. He also needed to be careful. The next day, he received an unexpected email from work. The company was offering a short-term bonus for employees who completed the recent training program. He read it twice, then laughed quietly. He signed the permission slip. That weekend, he took his child to the park. They shared a simple meal on a bench and watched people walk by. The sun was warm, and for once, he did not feel rushed. From a distance, the older man watched again, not through cameras this time, but through updates and reports. He saw the impact not in numbers, but in moments. Fewer late payments, more stable routines, small signs of breathing room. Yet something still felt unfinished. He did not want to remain a shadow forever. The decision to meet was made slowly, carefully, not at the apartment, not at the workplace, somewhere neutral. The older man asked his assistant to arrange a simple meeting under the pretense of community discussion related to work training. Nothing that would raise suspicion. Nothing that would make the single father feel targeted. When the invitation arrived, the single father was confused but curious. The message was polite, brief, and optional. It mentioned feedback, future opportunities, and refreshments. He almost declined. Time was precious. But the meeting was scheduled during a free hour, and something told him to go. He had learned to trust small instincts. On the day of the meeting, he arrived early. The room was modest. A few chairs. A table with water and coffee. Nothing impressive. He waited quietly. When the older man entered, there were no assistants at his side. No suits. No formal introductions. Just two people in the same room. For a moment, neither spoke. The older man broke the silence first. He thanked him for coming. His voice was calm, steady, and familiar in a way the single father could not immediately place. Then it clicked. The road, the car, the face. The single father felt a wave of recognition, followed by confusion. He stood up slowly. "You," he said quietly. The older man nodded. Yes. There was no dramatic pause, no raised voices, just a shared memory settling into place. I've been looking for a way to thank you, the older man continued, but I didn't want to do it the wrong way. The single father sat back down, still processing. He did not smile. He did not frown. He listened. You didn't have to do anything, he said after a moment. Anyone would have stopped. The older man shook his head gently. Not everyone does. And not everyone walks away without asking for more. The room was quiet again. Outside, traffic moved as usual. People passed by unaware that two lives had crossed once more. This time, not on a dark road, but in the calm space between gratitude and humility. And though the single father did not yet know what this meeting would lead to, he sensed that the quiet changes in his life were not random after all. They were connected, and part of something still unfolding. The room stayed quiet for a while after the recognition settled in. Neither man rushed to fill the silence. It was not awkward. It felt honest. The single father looked at the older man again, this time more carefully. He noticed how tired he looked beneath the calm face. Not weak, just human. The older man spoke first. He said he was grateful, not in a dramatic way, not with big words. He said it simply, the way someone speaks when they mean it. He explained how close things had come to ending that night, how a few minutes had made the difference. The single father listened without interrupting. When the older man finished, he nodded once. I just did what anyone should do, he said. His voice was steady. I didn't think about anything else. The older man smiled faintly. That's what makes it matter, he replied. They talked for a while. About work, about life, about how strange the city could feel, even when full of people. The conversation stayed simple. There was no talk of money, no offers, no promises. That was intentional. When the meeting ended, the older man stood and extended his hand. The single father shook it. The grip was firm, respectful, equal. As they parted ways, the older man said one last thing. If you ever need help, I hope you'll let me know. The single father nodded. I will, he said. He did not add anything else. He walked out of the building and into the afternoon light. The city noise returned all at once. Cars, voices, footsteps, life moving forward. He took a deep breath and checked the time. He needed to pick up his child. That evening, nothing felt different on the surface. Dinner was simple. Homework took longer than expected. A small disagreement ended in laughter. The single father tucked his child into bed and turned off the light. But later, as he sat alone in the quiet living room, he thought about the meeting, not with excitement, with calm understanding. He realized something important. The help he had been receiving had never made him feel small. It had not taken away his effort or pride. It had simply made the road easier to walk. Across town, the older man sat in his study, reflecting on the same meeting. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of balance. Gratitude had been expressed. Respect had been kept intact. He made one final decision. The support would continue, but it would always be indirect. Opportunities, stability, room to breathe, never control. Weeks turned into months. The single father's life slowly improved in ways that felt earned. A better role opened up at work after additional training. The pay increase was modest but steady. His schedule became more predictable. Evenings felt less rushed. His child grew more confident at school. Teachers noticed the change. There were smiles at dinner that came easier now. Conversations lasted longer. One night, while cleaning the kitchen, the single father paused and leaned against the counter. He felt tired, but not crushed. For the first time in years, he felt like he was standing on solid ground. He never spoke publicly about the night on the road. He never told coworkers or neighbors. To him, it remained a private moment. The older man also kept the story quiet. There were no interviews, no speeches, no articles. He continued his work, but with a different lens. He paid closer attention to people who worked quietly behind the scenes, people who carried responsibility without applause. Sometimes their paths cross again, brief meetings, short conversations, nothing formal, No labels. They never became close friends. They did not need to. What connected them was not status or obligation. It was understanding. One afternoon, months later, the single father and his child walked past the same road where everything had begun. The traffic was heavier now. The moment could have passed unnoticed. But the child asked a simple question. Do you remember that place? The single father nodded. Yes, he said. What happened there? He thought for a moment. Then he answered honestly. Someone needed help, and someone stopped. That was all he said. That night, as the city lights flickered outside the apartment window, the single father reflected on how close he had come to walking away that evening, how easy it would have been to keep going. He understood now that life did not always change with loud moments. Sometimes it shifted because of quiet choices made when no one was watching. Across the city, the older man looked out over the same skyline. He felt grateful not just for being alive, but for the lesson he had been given. Power did not come from wealth alone. It came from the ability to see others clearly. Two lives had crossed for only a few minutes on a dark road. Neither had expected anything from it. Yet both had been changed, not because of money, not because of recognition, but because one person chose to act and the other chose to remember. The city kept moving. New stories began every day. But this one stayed quiet, carried only in the hearts of two people who understood that real character shows itself when no one is there to applaud. And somewhere in that understanding, both found a kind of peace they had not known before.